Leaders from across the continent are gathering in Addis Ababa to discuss various regional issues. But before the summit could make headway, it has already been hit by controversy. The row is over a map displayed by Ethiopia at the gathering. During an African Union Executive Council session, which was taking place at the headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia displayed a large poster of the map of the continent. It intended to feature each country's flag over its respective map. And this is how it looked. The map behind the president of Ethiopia included parts of Somalia, Djibouti, and Eritrea within its borders. It also attributed significant portions of Morocco to Algeria and has declared Western Sahara as a separate country, which is claimed by Morocco. Now, the original map, as per the current African nation's boundary, should somewhat look like this. The images of the Ethiopian version of the map have sparked outrage on social media, where people have been calling out Ethiopia's invasive ambitions. Though these images have been circulating on social media and have also been posted by various news outlets, Google directs their origin to official handles of Ethiopian ministry and state-owned media. However, when you click on them, it shows that the posts have now been deleted. So does Ethiopia really want to take over the Horn of Africa? It has had fraught relations with all of its neighbors. Let's look at them one by one. Ethiopia was embroiled in a long-standing dispute with neighboring Somalia after it signed a deal with Somalia's breakaway territory of Somaliland to gain access to its Berbera port. But last year, both nations signed a Turkey-mediated peace deal to resolve the issue, under which it is expected that Ethiopia will now instead gain access to Somalia's port of Hobyo. Now, the Ethiopian version of the African map does show this port as a part of Ethiopian territory, giving birth to the speculation that landlocked Ethiopia has indeed gained access to the Somalian port as a part of the deal. However, Somalia, whose delegation is also present at the African Union Summit, has not formally commented on the map controversy. Now, moving on to Eritrea, which was once a part of Ethiopia. Tensions between the two nations over borders continued after Eritrea gained independence in 1993. It also led to a full-scale war between 1998 and 2000. After years of thaw, fears of new conflict still persist. Then comes Djibouti. The tiny nation has had several periods of conflicts with Ethiopia, including clashes between rival militia and the flight of the Ethiopian soldiers into Djibouti. Moving a bit further away from the Horn of Africa, where Ethiopia has a conflicting stance with Morocco. It recognizes Western Sahara since 1979, a territory claimed by Rabat, and its new Africa map reaffirms its stance. Now, Ethiopia, which is an emerging economic powerhouse in Africa, is being seen by critics as a hegemon in the region, which is eyeing more territory and influence. But will claiming territory be its approach?
The African Union plans to present a united front in demanding reparations for former colonial powers. They want a formal apology and financial compensation. But so far, such calls yielded little. A top expert here warns that the AU's demands will be impossible to achieve due to the foreign aid that the region receives from the Western powers.
Forget reparations, even the ongoing aid is not going to happen in Africa. And this reparations issue is arguable on many points. For one, Africa has received over $2 trillion in terms of development aid. Whatever money you give Africa now, with the kind of conflicts we have in this continent, about 39 countries have some form of conflict, with the kind of corruption, even if you bring more trillions, it's not going to transform Africa.
African leaders will also be electing a new chairperson and members of the African Union Commission. This time round, the position will go to a candidate from East Africa, and 3 contenders have put their names forward. Kenya's opposition leader and former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has pledged to continue the fight for 2 permanent seats for the continent at the UN Security Council. Djibouti's foreign minister Mahmoud Ali Yusuf, wants African countries to tackle their own security because foreign support is no longer sustainable. While Madagascar's Foreign Affairs Minister Richard Randriamadrato pledges to grow intra-African trade, which is at just over 12%. But how to deal security on the continent are likely to take center stage. The war in Sudan has been going on for about 2 years, and it has become the world's worst humanitarian crisis. The conflict in eastern Congo that has raised tensions between the Democratic Republic of the Congo and Rwanda. Even though it's not on the agenda, the 55 countries that form the African Union will also have to figure out how to deal with the US President Donald Trump's administration and fill the holes that recent foreign aid cuts have created in the national budget. They'll also try to work out a common climate agenda for its 1.4 billion people. Brenda Radido, TRT World, at the AU headquarters in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia.
At the Humanitarian Pledging Conference for Sudan held in Paris in April 2024, Kenya pledged $1 million to support humanitarian efforts in Sudan. I am pleased to reaffirm that Kenya will fulfill this pledge with an additional $1 million to demonstrate our support for the Sudanese people. Finally, we urge all external actors supporting the warring parties to refrain from actions that further endanger the lives and future of the Sudanese people. As members of the African Union and the United Nations, we must uphold the fundamental principles of respect for territorial integrity, national sovereignty, and good neighborliness in our pursuit for lasting peace and stability in the Sudan. I thank you for your attention. Our presence here today reaffirms our unwavering solidarity with the people of Sudan. It is incumbent upon all of us, member states and people of goodwill, alike to support ongoing efforts towards a peaceful resolution while addressing the urgent humanitarian needs of those affected by this conflict, especially women and children. Only through collective commitment and decisive action can we help restore stability and hope for a peaceful future in Sudan. Kenya continues to urge the warring parties to recognize that a military solution, if any, will not and has never brought sustainable peace. We encourage all Sudanese stakeholders to commit to a political resolution through genuine and inclusive dialogue. We continue in Kenya to provide a platform for different actors, political groups, civil society groups, to forge agreement, consensus on the way forward. And as a steadfast advocate for peace, Kenya, alongside IGAD, remains fully prepared to support and facilitate efforts towards a negotiated settlement. It is also imperative that we work together to alleviate the suffering of our Sudanese brothers and sisters. This crisis is worsened by the massive displacement of civilians, with an estimated 11 million people forced to flee their homes. The collapse of healthcare systems, the spread of preventable diseases, and the deterioration of medical infrastructure have further deepened humanitarian emergency. The crisis' regional impact is equally severe as neighboring countries are struggling with overstretched social services due to the growing refugee crisis. This situation demands urgent regional and global intervention. Any discussion of the humanitarian crisis in Sudan must acknowledge that this is a man-made disaster. It is deeply regrettable that the dire humanitarian situation in Sudan stemmed from a political crisis that has escalated into prolonged and senseless armed conflict. the obstruction of humanitarian access by parties to the conflict is simply unacceptable. We call upon all involved to facilitate unrestricted access for humanitarian convoys and healthcare workers and to allow the resumption of agricultural activity in areas under their control.
Paul Mwite is one of a team of lawyers who represented Mau Mau freedom fighters in court in the UK about a decade ago. He reads an extract of Wambugu Mnyingi's testimony,
where the corpses had been placed awaiting burial.
Nyingi, alongside others, testified in 2012 in London. They told the court that they were tortured by British security forces during Kenya's fight for independence. The UK later settled the case out of court. Wambugu died 2 years ago. Mwite says some African leaders have failed their freedom fighters.
The leaders get into office after independence to line their pockets, that's the issue, at the expense of the people.
The Mau Mau rebellion started in 1952. More than 10,000 Kenyans were killed. Many were tortured, displaced from their homes, their land taken away by British settlers. The British government founded this memorial site. It's a reminder of what happened and sacrifices that were made by those who died. The UK also expressed regret of abuses that were committed during colonial rule. But many Kenyans say they want a proper apology. The wounds of slavery and colonialism remain unhealed in Africa. During that time, important cultural artifacts and treasures were stolen and are still displayed in museums in Europe and the US. So this year's Africa Union Summit theme is reparations and justice.
The moment you ask for reparations, the other party would have to first and foremost say, I'm sorry. Without saying sorry, without an apology, there cannot be reparations. And the people who stole all the things that we are talking about have not rendered any apology.
Many Kenyans who fought for independence died poor and disillusioned. Those still alive say there is not much to celebrate.